Writing assistant is a concept that has been introduced by some lexicographers and meta-lexicographers to cover a certain number of tools, existing tools and older tools. And one of the characteristics, according to Anna Frankenberg, should be that there are intuitive resources. And of course, a lot of existing applications share this characteristic. NetSpeak, Just a Word, Writeful, for instance. And another characteristic, according to Anna Frankenberg, is that they should be accessed from within digital writing environments. And unfortunately, as far as I know, only 2 lexicographic projects meet this condition. The Collocate, the project of Anna, and Awesome. And it's different if you look at other applications. Grammarly, for instance, they all have this kind of format. And we strongly believe that if we want to have really effective writing assistant, we should use this format. And that's the first point I want to make today. The second point is that we also need to revisit, to review, to reconsider the data we offer to the user. I think we can't simply copy and paste dictionary data and put them into a writing assistant. And I will try to illustrate this with some applications we developed for 5 different writing assistants we made at our institute. We have 3 different for Dutch, 1 for academic English and 1 for Afrikaans. They are all quite intuitive in this sense that simply you copy your text in the text area on the online page, and then you click on one, I will look at the camera, on one of these links here on the left of the screen, and each link provides a certain check on the text. As a result, the user gets a general comment on top of the screen and a specific comment linked to a marked word in the text or to a sentence, something that has been flagged into the text. So it's very intuitive, and it's also integrated into the writing environment of the student. Okay, but we have 3 more characteristics, 3 important characteristics, I think. The first one is that you need to make a different version according to your target audience. So for Dutch, we have 3 different versions, 1 for non-natives, 1 for natives, and 1 for academics. That's very important. Another important characteristic is the fact that we not only introduce lexicographic data, also data taken from corpus analysis, but also NLP techniques and even a flavor of artificial intelligence. I will come back to this later on. And the last characteristic, also very important, is that we think that these writing assistants should fulfill 3 functions, 3 different functions. The first one is a corrective function. If there is somewhere an error, there should be some suggestion for a correction. The detective function, for instance, we know that our students often overuse the passive sentences in their text. So there is a check on passive sentences. They are all marked in the text. And we just say to the students, well, look at your text, and if you find that there are too many passive sentences, it's up to you to correct them. We don't do it, we simply detect it. And the third, and I think maybe the most important function, is a predictive function. This means that we suggest information that can enhance the text, that can make the text better. I give some examples within a few minutes. So, intuitive, integrated into a writing environment, and these 3 characteristics as you can see them on the screen. So let's take a couple of examples. There is, of course, a spell checker for Dutch. Dutch is a difficult language because, the same in German, we have compounds. And even a very good spell checker as Word has a lot of difficulties and flags very common words because somewhere they are not in the list or somewhere the algorithm is not that good. So we try to avoid those false positives. And what we also try to do is to find a system to mark in the text words that are written separately. A lot of English-speaking people tend to write those words separately in Dutch, and they have to be a compound. So what's the workflow we used? Well, we tried to break down existing compounds. We had a list of potential modifiers and heads, so that we can recognize much more compounds that, for instance, Word can do. And with this list and a set of restricting rules, we were also able to mark in the text words that are written separately. I give you an example. This is, for instance, a text written by a student. Dit toestel is een beweging trainer. Two words written separately, they should be written together. Our spell checker tells the user, you should write it as one word, and it also indicates if there is some interfix S or not. There are no real rules in Dutch for this interfix S. When you put two words together, put an S or not, but based on the corpus, based on the data we have, we can give this specific information. Spelling check. Word finder, this predictive function of our tool. Well, you all know that non-natives know much more words than they use, and you all know, of course, that word combinations are very difficult in a foreign language. So what we try to do in this case is that we try to suggest relevant adjectives where there is no adjective in front of a noun in the text. So, for Dutch, for instance, with the use of a parser, we identify sentences with a noun not preceded by an adjective. We then go to data provided by Google, Ngrams for Dutch, with a semantic tagging of adjectives, and we simply list a certain number of possible adjectives in this context with this noun, ordered semantically and ordered by frequency. What's the result? Well, these are the categories we have distinguished. We have qualitative, quantitative, time indication, sequence, and so on. And this is the real result when the user has a sentence like, I live in a house. The system indicates, marks, there is house, is a noun, there is no adjective in front, and he gives this list, adjectives with very good, good, bad, or very bad, and so on. So he can just choose a lot of adjectives, possible adjectives, that could be used in this context. If you are Dutch speaking and you read fast, you will see some errors in this list. For instance, passieve huis, that has nothing to do with something that's not good. That's simply a technical term for a specific type of house. Yeah. There are probably 5% of errors in the list of data we give. But we have millions of those combinations, so it's impossible to correct them manually. But we think that's better to have 95% of interesting combinations and 5% of errors than nothing at all. No. Okay. So this is the second application we developed. For English, we link to an external freely available database. It's the Flax database. It's not the best one, but it's something that can be used for English in our version for academic English. And as you can see, you have also these suggestions of adjectives and verbs that you can use with all kinds of words. A third example, again, kind of word finder. Again, the same idea. We know much more words than we use. Well, we try to suggest related words that extend the scope of the text. We all know that we have dictionary of synonyms, but this is not really interesting for this purpose. We have also thesaurus, but that's not very interesting. So we try to do something better with word embeddings. Word embeddings is in fact a technique that tries to calculate some value of semantic relatedness between two words. And in fact, we are very lucky because on the website of FastText, what's mentioned here, you can find those information for 157 different languages. For Dutch, for instance, there is a big file, 2 million word forms and 300 numbers. So for each word form, you have one value for 300 different dimensions. And you can calculate then the semantic relatedness between all kinds of words within these 2 millions. I didn't do it because the computer was not powerful enough, but I limited myself to, I don't know, something like 10,000 words, and this is the result. Again, the same thing. User is writing something like, I live in a house, and that's the suggestions you can find with those word embeddings. And you have things like my garden, the neighborhood, what do you have else? The community where I live. So these are all information, IDs, words that can be used if you want to enlarge the scope of your text. Okay? So this is also something we put in this writing assistant for non-native Dutch speakers. The same thing for adjectives, for instance, where you have something like mooi, which is a very common one. Well, you can have something like prachtig, schitterend, geweldig, which are, let's say, better words with some more semantic value. The last one, and that's the flavor of artificial intelligence. Well, artificial intelligence is hot. Everybody is talking about it. We thought, well, let's try something and see if we can integrate this into a writing assistant. And we tried it on the use of prepositions in English. So according to Leacock, 13.5% of all errors in the Cambridge Learner Corpus are errors on preposition use. So it's a big problem. There have been a lot of attempts to find systems to detect and correct errors in preposition use. They are quite successful, but we thought maybe we can do better. So what's the workflow we used? Well, first of all, we detect prepositions in a text using the parser, and we use Spacy. It's a well-known parser. We then submit the context of 4 words to the left, 4 words to the right, to our language model. Language model has been built on a pre-trained Wikitext model available freely online. It has been fine-tuned using training data. For each preposition, we just put 50,000 examples into the model, and we put a classifier on top of it. That's quite technical. What's the result? That's much more interesting, of course. Well, we start from a sentence, as for instance, it was closed of some reason, I still don't know. We pass the sentence and Spacy tells us that of is a preposition. We then take the context 4 words to the left, 4 words to the right, and we submit it to the language model. What's the result? That's the result. It simply gives a probability for all prepositions we have trained, and it says in this case that for the language model 99.96% sure that in this case it will be 4. That's interesting because we can use thresholds. We can see until what kind of probability is accurate or not. And the test on about 250 words give us this result. If the probability is more than 0.975, so 97.5%, we reach more than 95% of accuracy, and that's the case for almost 45% of the tested sentences. So in these cases, if the system finds something that's different from the text, it will say, well, this is probably an error on preposition use. If we reach a probability that's less than 0.975, but it's still higher than 0.85, we have something like 70% of accuracy. And in this case, we could give both options to the user, saying, well, we found something else, we can give some examples, and then it's up to the user to see if he has to change his preposition or not. This is not a perfect system. We are still working and trying to make the results better, and we hope, for instance, with adding n-grams that we can reach something better. But that's what we are trying to do to see if we can still make our writing assistants better. Of course, 2 big questions remain. What's the performance? It will be okay, 5 minutes. What's the performance on the one hand, and what's the added value on the other? Well, performance, we have certainly state-of-the-art for some features. The spell checker of Dutch, for instance, we made a test on a corpus of 100 authentic errors, and we found them all. But we are not the only one. Word only found 91 of the 100. So we are better than Word. Yeah. For specific language errors for English, by Dutch native Dutch language speakers, we are certainly also state-of-the-art because we have a long list of those kinds of errors. For other features, probably not. Grammarly is probably better than us for a lot of things. We are better than Grammarly for others. It's very difficult to really evaluate, from an objective point of view, the value of those kinds of things. But what's really important for us is the fact that we have these three functions: correction and detection and prediction. And I think this is really essential if you want to make a good writing assistant. Performance is one thing, added value is another one. Well, Leacock says that a system that improves documents is not necessarily a system that improves writers, and that's true. Probably on some items there is a positive impact from this writing assistant on the user. For other items, not. So we conducted some research, and that's also the findings that we have. There are some problems that will never be, let's say, corrected as they should be by a user, other will be. But what's important for us is just to look at the statistics of the use of our writing assistants by our students. And we are very glad to see that every year we have more and more users. So at least they think this is interesting for them. Yeah? Maybe it doesn't make them better writers, but at least they think it's interesting. Okay. So what's the conclusion? Well, if you look at this model, it's the Hayes flower writing model, you see that our impact is very limited. We only work on revising, reviewing the text. There are a lot of other things in writing. We don't have anything on the planning. We don't have anything on the argumentative structure of a text. And even for linguistic items, for instance, the moves, those chunks of lexical bundles you find in every academic text, we don't have anything at this moment. So there is still a work to do. And even for the applications we developed, we have to improve them. So we could add more errors for academic English, for instance. We could also add a word order check for Dutch, because this is a big problem for non-natives. We could try to increase the accuracy for preposition errors. And for the predictive function, we could also add, for instance, a translation to all these word combinations that we give now, so that for a user it can be easier to integrate the right combination in his text. So as you can see, and that's the conclusion of almost all talks, there is still a lot of work to do. So thank you for your attention, and if you have some questions, I will be glad to answer. And if you want to see a demo of those writing assistants, I will be here until the end of the conference, so during the break, just ask me and we'll be glad to show you what we developed. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the talk. Now questions? Yes? So do we have...
Thank you for your nice talk. I would like to ask, in which aspect, in particular, your system is better than Grammarly? Can you say it or describe them? Or...
Well, we didn't really study this in detail. But from something, for instance, we have one of the difficulties we try to integrate is the use of whose and whose. Well, if we just look at 10 or 20 sentences, we see that we find most of the errors and Grammarly not. On other things, Grammarly is better. So it's really difficult also to have some kind of objective corpus of errors, because we put a lot of things, a lot of errors made by our Dutch-speaking students. Grammarly didn't, of course. So it's really difficult to evaluate. So we try to do as much as we can.
Thanks. Any other questions? Comments? Yes, Elon?
If I may extend my question, what's the importance of writing correctly? Especially today, it seems that people, in the point of bringing out their individuality and doing things in a different way. For example, one of our colleagues likes to never use caps. And secondly, I'm interested in your opinion, of
your first question, as a language teacher of myself and language teacher of French, I want to keep my job. So I want students also to write correctly. And if they don't, I have some work to correct them. So, well, that's maybe not the best answer I can give, but I think it's important just to keep somehow a possibility to understand each other, because if you don't have some standards, you can write anything or you can say anything, and it will be difficult to understand each other. The relevance to lexicography, well, unfortunately, if you see those kinds of tools, lexicography is a little bit disappearing. The visibility of lexicography is a little bit disappearing, because you don't see a dictionary, you don't see really the work done by a lexicographer. But on the other hand, I think for the user, those kinds of tools are much more interesting than a dictionary. I'm sorry to say that, I'm a lexicographer myself, but that's a fact, I think. It's a little bit like the cameras today. You have those digital cameras, really big things, and you have your iPhone. And you see that almost everybody is using an iPhone to make pictures, and only a few are still using this digital camera, making very beautiful things. Well, that's maybe what like dictionaries will be, some beautiful things that are used by specialists to do all kinds of things. But let's say that almost everybody will use his iPhone. I will be happy to have a spell checker integrated into his working environment.
Thank you. Any other questions? If you finished, I mean, the answer. You finished the answer.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Well, we still have some time, so let me ask one thing myself. Mm-hmm. So if your tool is the iPhone for the 21st century, in the sense of,
not
helping...
only my tool, there are other tools.
Yeah. I'm joking. So the question is, what you put inside the system is, well, fast text, embeddings, n-grams, and so on. So did you think about just including also dictionaries? Something that is, you can define the word?
Of course,
yes.
Of course. It depends on what you want to do. In this case, we have a writing tool. Yeah. We're also developing a reading tool along the system with the same format. And at that moment, you will probably have something like translations or definitions or synonyms or something like that. So in the core, you will still need those lexicographic tools and the lexicographic data. But they will be presented in another way than what we would usually do if we have a dictionary.
All right. So it's actually two tools then. The writing and reading assistant.
Two different things, so you need two different tools. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts? Yes.
Maybe I can add, if you have some writing tools, reading tool, what's important are those chunks, multi-word expressions. If you are a non-native, you copy a text from a newspaper site, for instance, you put this into this reading tool, it should show you those multi-word expressions. It should show you also the collocations you find in the text.
Yeah. I mean, could be useful also if you're writing. I don't know, perhaps, to suggest similar things. So, yeah. In the sense that maybe we don't know always what we write about. So, any other thoughts? Okay, then let's thank our speaker. Thank you again. 5 minutes for changing the rooms. Okay, so we'll start with the next talk, and let me just say one thing in the beginning. It seems that the acoustics in this hall, so you can hear everything anyone says, even if it's in the left corner there. So please just be quiet, don't whisper during the talk. Please.
Thank you. I'm Anna, and I'd just like to draw attention that two other members of our team, this is a team effort, are here. Robert and Garrett are also here. Okay, so I would like to start my talk going back to 1987 with the first developments of eLexicography and the co-build project led by Sinclair. When lexical analyses began to be aided by corpora, and we had concordances, word lists, and collocations to help us develop our dictionaries. Things have evolved a lot, and today we have marvelous things like word sketches, which give us a lexical summary of how words are used with other words. We have logdice, which is much better statistics for lexicography. We have GoodX, which helps us find good dictionary examples from corpora. So I think everyone in this room today working with eLexicography, we are very happy that now headword lists and defining vocabularies have been adjusted to better reflect language use. Definitions can be enhanced with linguistic data beyond introspection. We can give improved coverage to syntactic patterns, lexical collocations, and phraseology. And there's an abundance of authentic examples that we can use. And yet, when compiling the lexical database for Collocade, we noted problems that seem to be slipping through the cracks of eLexicography. And this is what we want to talk about today. So what I'm going to do is present some of the lessons we learned and some examples of issues we encountered. Okay, so very briefly, many of you already know what Collocade is because we've given presentations of Collocade at EURELEX and other conferences. But very briefly, for those of you who don't know, academic writing is hard, and Collocade is a text editor that assists writers with academic English collocations. So it's something very focused. Our work was perhaps inspired by Serge Verlinde's work, which is much broader than ours. Here we focus only on academic English and only on collocations. So how does Collocade work? Well, our interface looks like any other text editor, and it's available online, and you start writing, and if a word is covered in our database, it gets underlined in green, and we work with human-computer interaction concepts, as if you were here in yesterday's workshop, which Garrett delivered, you will know all about that. So it gets underlined, which means we have collocation suggestions for the word advantage. And if you are not interested, don't bother me, I'm concentrated, you just carry on writing and ignore it. If you're interested, you can click, and you get some collocation suggestions. So here you get the verb that's most strongly associated with advantage in academic English, the adjective or modifier, and you have prepositions. Okay, you found what you wanted there and there, carry on writing. You can double click to insert it into your text. If not, you can expand these menus, and let's suppose you want to find more modifiers or adjectives to use with advantage. So you can click and you expand, and here we present only the first 8, also because of HCI issues. And if you find what you want there, you can, but you're not sure how to use it in your text, you can click, and here I expanded added advantage, so you can see here some curated corpus examples of how added advantage is used in academic texts. If you don't find anything in the first 8, you can click on more, and then we present a sidebar with lots of other collocations used in academic English, and those are linked to an external resource, no curated examples. Okay, so what's different about Collocate? It can help writers expand their academic collocation repertoire because it gives real-time collocation reminders. So you can access collocations that you might not remember to use. And there's this interactive text editor integration, which means you don't have to stop writing, and the collocation suggestions are easy to find. But they're only given when they are sought, so they don't interrupt your writing. It's also based on the concept of data-driven learning developed by Tim Johns. We show how collocations are used, we don't explain them. And meta-language is kept to a minimum. And we have curated the lexical data so that users don't get distracted with irrelevant or misleading information or an overload of information, because academic writing is already sufficiently cognitively demanding. Okay, so what lessons did we learn then? First, we're going to talk about issues with node selection, then with collocation research, and then with corpus examples. So node selection. People, when they're writing, they don't ask things, where in my text can I fit in conduct research? They ask themselves, oh, what verb can I use with research? So our starting point is the node, not the collocation. And for our project, we aimed to cover around 500 collocation nodes, and we want them to be maximally useful to general academic English. And this is because this is a 36-month project. So we focus on noun, verbs, and adjectives from 3 well-known word lists of general academic English. And these 3 word lists are extracted using different methods and different corpora, and in using the 3 of them, we aimed to build on the strengths of each list. Okay, the lists we used were the academic keyword list developed by Magali Paco, and it emphasizes academic keyness. Then we used a subset of the academic vocabulary list, but the one which overlaps with student writing from the Bo corpus. So it emphasizes novice academic writing vocabulary. And the third list is the academic collocations list, using not the collocation, but the headwords that are listed in the Longman Collocations Dictionary. So for the collocation conduct research, we used research as the node. Okay, and the emphasis of this list is obviously on strong collocations. Okay, so then we looked at how the lists intersect, and the academic keyness list is the biggest one. The smallest one is the one by student writers, and the biggish one, there's another biggish one, which emphasizes strong collocations. And when we looked at how they overlapped, there were 514 lemmas overlapping in at least 2 of the lists, which was perfect for us because we wanted to cover around 500. Even though all 3 lists are about core general academic vocabulary, they overlap a lot less than expected. Look at this. If you look at all three lists, there are only 187 verbs, nouns, and adjectives in common. And these are the other intersections. So the first lesson, word lists aiming for similar vocabulary coverage, i.e. core academic vocabulary. They can differ quite substantially depending on the corpora and extraction methods used. And we decided to look at what was left out then. So if we take the two big lists, and they're based on expert writing, not student writing, we found that we left out lots of nouns on this side, compared to fewer here. Some verbs, lots of verbs here. Some adjectives, lots of adjectives here. To summarize, when we analyze what we left out from our intersections, we found that we successfully excluded lemmas that were not particularly academic by looking at the academic keyword list. But we also missed a good number of academic lemmas, particularly nouns. On the other side, we were able to successfully exclude lemmas that were not particularly productive in terms of collocation, things like actual, prime. But on the other hand, we missed a good number of academic lemmas, particularly verbs and adjectives. So the collocation list has a bias towards nouns. And then we put the student writing, the list that emphasizes student vocabulary, into the equation. And this is what we found. 33 lemmas did not make our initial selection. 9 nouns, 9 verbs, 15 adjectives. So we successfully excluded a few less relevant lemmas, like university in references, like Cambridge University Press, Oxford University Press, etc. We successfully excluded non-gradable adjectives, which are not really relevant for collocation purposes. But we missed maybe lexical teddy bears, words and lemmas that students overused. Maybe it's a matter of genre, that, essays and dissertations rather than professional academic texts. But surely some collocations here would be relevant, like manner, table, modified, beneficial. We also noted that basic lemmas with major academic meanings were missing from well-known academic word lists. So table was only in the student writing, it was only prominent in the student writing list. But here's field, step, paper, all outside the 3 lists. And we also noted that less central lemmas appear to be overrated in comparison. So why is application there and not paper, field, step, and code? So why were basic academic lemmas missing? We hypothesized that this might be because word lists disregard sense distinctions. So they're less sensitive to academic senses of lemmas that are widely used in general language too. Things like table, field, step, and paper. So we think, important academic senses get diluted and then they escape the frequency thresholds necessary to make it to an academic word list. So ideally in our project, if we have time, we will try to add those. What about the less central academic lemmas? Why were they overrated? And I'll explain this with 2 examples. The first is application. And you can see here that application has 3 broad general academic meanings. And what happens is that these 3 senses are lumped together, and together they seem to jump the rank queue. Another interesting case is code, where through dispersion figures, it looks as if it's interdisciplinary, but it's not. It's multidisciplinary. You could use code in very different ways in computing, in biology, and in language and linguistics. So here, terms with distinct discipline-specific senses get lumped together in word lists, and they also end up jumping the rank queue. Another issue was word class. And if you look at this table here, you can see some homographs are naturally more frequent than others, so some make the word list and others don't. But this can give the impression that lexical coverage is inconsistent to the user. So to gain more faith validity, we decided to include homographs even if they did not meet our thresholds. Okay, talking now about collocation research. We looked up collocations likely we researched collocations likely to be looked up for each node. So for a node like system, we get this kind of collocations. So we're looking for interdisciplinary lexical collocations and grammatical collocations like the prepositions. And we're using corpora of general academic English or of expert academic English. And we had these available, and in the end we leaned a lot on the Oxford corpus. That's why it's in bold, because it was the best one for our purposes. We used word sketches where collocates get sorted per grammar relation. So here's an example for adjectives or modifiers used with research. And we use log dice and co-occurrence thresholds over here. Then we excluded discipline-specific words like market, because everyone working in market research already knows this. We were interested not in discipline-specific, but in things that are not discipline-specific. So, and then we excluded more open choice combinations like more research. Okay, now what issues? So here's a word sketch for verbs used with research as object in the Pearson International Corpus of Academic English. Is anything missing? Aha. Come on. Where's carry out? It's not in the word sketch, but it occurs 303 times in the span of research. So the problem here, it seems to be the space. And we found lots of examples of problems with space. Another problem is word sketches sort collocates according to word class. So you have the verbs that go with argument and the prepositions that go with argument. But collocation paradigms don't always evoke a single word class. Look at this. These are all paradigmatic, and the last two, concern, regard, they appear in the word sketch for verbs, not in the word sketch for prepositions. So we decided to move them. Remove concern from here and add concerning here. Remove regard from the verbal paradigm and add it here. Another issue. If you look at these two examples, they look very similar, right? However, they're similar only on the surface because the grammar relation differs. It's not attitude to in this case, but convey to. Here it's not community develops, but connectedness develops. So what's happening is that the collocate is misidentified, which ends up distorting log dice and co-occurrence figures. Another issue here. Again, on the surface, very similar, but semantically, late and latest, increased and increasing mean very different things. So it also affects log dice and co-occurrence. So polysemous collocates like these seem to get bumped up the queue. Another issue, to avoid overwhelming writers with too many collocations, as Garant pointed out yesterday, we provide at this level only the top 8 collocates sorted by log dice. If you want, you can click on more. Here we were lucky because you have positive attitude and negative attitude. However, here we don't. And what we did, we had to curate the data to avoid the impression of inconsistent coverage. Why is negative there and not positive there? Only negative makes the threshold, but positive, someone might be missing. Okay, finally, example selection. Examples selected from corpora of expert academic writing. So we started from the word sketch and went to the concordance with editorial intervention to select, adapt, anonymize, or shorten examples as necessary. We wanted examples to be interdisciplinary or at least easily transferable to other disciplines, and we wanted examples to promote data-driven learning, so we are offering not just one example, but 3 to consolidate. This is how you use it. And we want to give colligation cues if relevant or possible. And finally, we want examples to be brief, so they have less effort to process, less distracting for writers concentrating on their text and not on reading the examples. And for this, GoodX was a real help. Okay, so some issues. If you go from word sketch to examples here, you can see without GoodX, and I'm using the sentence format because we wanted to find which ones were best for our tool. It's not very easy to select good examples, and these examples are very long and would be very distracting for writers. So it's not very helpful. So we tried with GoodX, and it's a lot better here. You can see it's much easier for us to find good examples for the writers. However, look what we noted. The longest commonest match in this case is less evident, and where the colligation here is to use activities undertaken in the passive, you only have here 2 examples in the top examples. Okay, so Collocate 0.4, which is the current version we have, is still undergoing some editing and proofreading. Don't expect it to be perfect. And to prove my case, you can see here activities undertaken, and all the examples are in the active voice, and so it's not showing the colligation. But we do have now 551 lemmas. It's pretty usable. With 9,000 core collocations with examples, the full treatment with examples, plus 22,000 extra collocations on the sidebar, and 26,000 authentic examples, curated examples. So in conclusion, we couldn't have achieved anything near this without eLexicographic tools and resources and reusing very valuable work that other people have done. We didn't want to reinvent the wheel, and people's work before us has been really useful. But we have spent a lot of time, well, Garant did, curating the data manually. So what we hope with this presentation is that our analysis of what needs editing or manual curation can contribute to further advances in e-lexicography. And we already saw in yesterday's collocation workshop that lots of things have already been done in this respect. But we do draw attention to the dangers of the uncritical use of existing tools and resources. And I finish with a little rhyme: trust the text, but beware of the rest. Thank you very much for your attention, or for your careful attention. And if you want more information about a project, we are funded by the UK Arts and Humanities Research Council. And you can come to our demo tomorrow to try out our tool in action. Thank you.
Thank you. So, time for questions and comments. Yes?
Thank you very much for this presentation. I'm extremely impressed by this tool. And I was just wondering, why limit this to academic English? Why not extend it to general language as well? I actually have 2 questions. That's one question. And the second is, I'm a language learner. I'm studying my 12th language now. I'm a polyglot. And this seems to me that it would be a great tool for other languages as well, not just English. So I was wondering if you're planning to extend this.
I have a very simple answer. Do you want to fund us? We had limited funding for 36 months, so we decided to focus on something very narrow. But I think there are things that can be reused in other projects and developments. So thank you for your question. And other languages, why not? Yes? And also integration with language-specific backgrounds. I have a PhD student starting now who is going to try and adapt this for academic writers of English who are native speakers of Portuguese. So we'll see how it goes.
Thanks. Really interesting talk. Thanks so much. I know that you've said that you had 36 months, and also that curation took time. Could you give us a sense of how much of that time was spent curating the examples, the actual extra work that was done by people as opposed to programmatically?
The actual work done by not people but by person. Maybe Garant would like to answer that, and Robert as well, because
I guess a rough estimate would be about 18 months or so.
18 months.
Yeah, full time.
University of Manchester, they have a so-called academic phrase bank.
Yes.
Have you heard?
Yes, and I spent some time in Brazil this year giving academic writing workshops and also to test Collocate, and we also used the academic. I use it all the time. I love it.
Okay, but could these phrases be useful for you also?
Yes, yes, they would.
And
certainly.
how? In which manner or?
Yeah, so that's what my PhD student is going to investigate and see if maybe Brazilian writers can write phrases in Portuguese that they don't remember, these standard academic phrases, and they can get automatically translated into standard English academic phrases if we can integrate that. This was a question, we did a user testing session in Paris and with Nathalie Kubler, and many of the people there were asking, can't you translate from French? So we are aware that this is a real need for non-native writers of academic English, yes.
But the question is also how to integrate all this knowledge into your system. Is it possible somehow?
Yeah, let us have a sit down and think about it. Yeah, we have to do that. Yes. Thank you for your question.
Okay. So last one, yeah, Alexander.
So last and hopefully very short question is, thank you for this convincing application of eLexicography to a realistic problem. My question is about reuse of the curated data. So in the sense that when you throw out the wrong examples in a corpus, do you keep track of this? And is the reuse of these data possible in the sense of that we all look for gold standard for these corpora?
Well, we're going to write up this with lots of examples that we saw that were problematic. And hopefully, when we write up an article, it will be a lot juicier and be more valuable. And from these examples, there will be hints as to what other things or similar things, analogous problems you can look out for. That's what we hope.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Anna. Come on. Thank you. And we start again in 3 minutes. Okay, so I know that you just started talking between each other again, but now the presentation starts. This time, Jelena Kalas on lexicographic practices in Europe. Please.
Yeah. So, hello, dear lexicographic community here and also on the other side of the screen. As you see, there are five presenters. Karol, Istok, me, Jelena Kalas, Margit are all here, and Svetla is not here. And I'm going to present the results of our eLex survey on user needs. It's called Lexicographic Practices in Europe. And Alexis is right behind me, and we have our booth also over there. So if you need to know more about Alexis, come and ask there. So our aim of this survey was to get a good overview of, first of all, lexicographic practices both for bone digital and retrodigitized resources. Then we wanted to know, we as lexicographers, what kind of tools and methods we use for compiling dictionaries at the moment. And also, what was the most important part, the needs, what lexicographers have now or anticipate to have in the short-term and long-term future. And all this survey, it was carried out in the context of Horizon 2020 project, European Lexicographic Infrastructure, eLexis. And since it's called European infrastructure, of course, we were focused mostly on Europe, but we also disseminated the survey outside Europe. Methodology was quite easy, so we used online questionnaire, Google Forms. The most problematic with Google Forms is just that it doesn't allow nesting of questions. It was one thing to point out about Google Forms. It was from July to October last year. We used different kind of mailing links, social networks, conferences. And the whole questionnaire for lexicographers, it consisted of from 44 questions. And all those 44 questions were divided into 6 parts. General information, ongoing work, what kind of projects do lexicographers have, software and tools, how do they compile, publication, what kind of publication medium do they use at the moment, retrodigitation, and past and the future. We ask such kind of questions. What were the major changes during last 10-15 years in your work, and what you think will be major changes next 10-15 years? And we try to put there a lot of open-ending questions so that these results would be more qualitative. And you can see this report in eLexis deliverable. If you go to eLexis homepage, eLexis, it's very easy to remember, eLex.is, and there you can see about deliverables and you can read our deliverable. Because we had 2 surveys, one for lexicographers and another one for institutions, and the one for institutions was more detailed. There were 86 questions. So here today I focus mostly on lexicographers' needs. So participation, we managed to get 159 respondents from 45 countries. We really tried to get all European countries involved, and sometimes we even wrote personal letters to colleagues, so please participate. And as I said, methodological concerns about Google Forms, it was that no nesting of questions. What was also important, like lesson learned, interpretation of terms may differ per person. For example, here are examples of more problematic, like bone digital, for example, IT support, outsourcing. It seems that it is clear, but it is not. For example, for bone digital dictionary, our definition was a dictionary conceptualized for the electronic medium, offering radically different options for organization and presentation of lexical information. And as a result, people who participated, they considered bone digital dictionaries just dictionaries which were compiled using the computer. So it means that in our lexicographic community, we need to discuss terms, so that we all speak the same language and understand things in the same way. And also one problematic thing was incomplete participation. It means that some people started to fill in, then they stopped, and as a result, we don't have the whole picture. Background. Of course, we were not the first one. As you know, this need for lexicographic community to become really a community, it was realized almost 10 years ago, and then we had this very successful cost-action European network for eLexicography, and they managed to get 300 lexicographers from 30 countries, and inside of this cost-action there were already 3 surveys about lexicographic needs. One was about workflow of corpus-based lexicography, and it showed that the role of computer is increasing, that the most time-consuming phase of dictionary compilation is data analysis, that lexicographers lack IT support, and also it was the first time when we realized that in this compilation process we also have very important phase of afterlife of dictionary. So in this afterlife of dictionary we just have 2 aspects. One is maintenance, all this technical part, server costs, updating the interface, and another one is really that we have to work with our users. It's not so that published online, done, so not anymore. The second survey was on dictionary writing system and corpus query systems, and this showed that the evident trend was that open source and commercial corpus query systems, they actually met the needs of lexicographers. But it is completely different picture with dictionary writing systems. And it still remains the same a little bit. And automatic knowledge acquisitions, there were this time already 13 types of lexicographic units that you can extract actually automatically. And it turned out that the most frequently extracted were frequency, example sentences, and lemma lists. So, of course, we took it all into consideration, and our survey, we also asked the same questions, but we focused also on training of lexicographers, what kind of, and on needs really, what else, educational needs, what else we need to take into consideration. So, the results of our survey. General background of respondent. Here you can see the picture of a very generalized profile of ordinary lexicographer. Maybe some of you can test if you fit it. So works at public institution on monolingual dictionary. And actually it's interesting fact that full-time in-house lexicographers, and there are a lot of us such kind of people here in the room, I suppose, that 86% work in public institutions, 17 at the universities, and only 5 for private companies. What it says us, it says that dictionaries are mostly compiled and published by public institutions. Monolingual dictionary, it also was dominant type of dictionaries, and which will be published online. Some institutions still have the policy that they publish online and in print, but the amount of projects which were said that they will print dictionaries, it was very small, so it goes online, and believe us, not all lexicographers are very happy with this. So, general lexicographer has a PhD and works for more than 20 years in lexicography. It indicates what? It says that once, like Carola said, once you're a lexicographer, you're the lexicographer for the rest of your life, because it just really, you get involved and you cannot forget it. So, has been trained with his own institution. This is very critical thing because it showed that only 11% studied lexicography at university. And it means that in institutions, we have to provide this education for young people ourselves. It takes time, and it's not that systematic. So this is like a weak point, but we get educated in our institution. For example, with senior lexicographer. And small, compared to small teams, 3-6 people, and that consists only of people from her institution. Since we are all very international, like for example, eLex, we have 17 partners, they are very international. But it seems that inside, in countries, it's still a kind of like closed community, so that not so international teams, and not that big teams. Software and tools. So how do we compile dictionaries? Our survey showed that 55% use both dictionary writing system and corpus query systems. And we are fine, but I want to stress, and I will stress at the end also, that lexicographic community is very heterogeneous. So there are also countries, they still have tools which don't allow them to present the data in structural way, and they still compile dictionaries in Word or Excel. But half are fine, both dictionary writing system, corpus query system. And in terms of dictionary writing systems, in our report you can find the list with links and description what kind of dictionary systems are there. And you can just divide into 3, commercial, open source, and in-house. And 22 corpus query system, and Sketch Engine is really dominating. So Sketch Engine is used in a lot of institutions, and if you are talking about corpus query systems, the same picture, commercial, open source, and in-house systems. Usually, common model is like for example, in my institute, Institute of the Estonian Language, we have our own in-house dictionary writing system. We develop it, we spend a lot of time and money on it, but we use commercial corpus query system. We use Sketch Engine. And this is very typical picture. And also it's very typical that one institution uses one dictionary writing system and one corpus query system. And some lexicographers still reported that they use several, and the reasons for this were that they are moving, for example, from commercial to open source, or they have different project needs, and then they need more dictionary writing systems. Compiling methods. How do we compile dictionaries? And here also important terminology, manual compilation. If I say manual compilation, probably we all have different kind of understanding on what does it mean. And in our research, 57% said that they compile dictionaries manually. And what they mean by this is that they analyze the data using corpus query system mostly, but then they insert information manually into dictionary writing system or on some other tool. That's what is called manual compilation. And you see this amount is quite big. We had altogether 122 projects mentioned, and only 30% use semi-automatically extracted data, and only 7% fully automatically extracted data. It means that this automated lexicography is not that common still in our community. And here you have the picture of this automatic data extraction. What kind of information is extracted fully automatically from corpus query system and then imported into dictionary writing system. And then it's really like post-editing of this information. And here the picture is that you see that the most common are, of course, headwords, lemma lists, collocations, frequencies, multi-word expressions, but this percentage is not big. Example sentences. Good dictionary example program is used now for many languages. What is weak part here is this part, because this was mentioned really like a need, like detection of neologisms, lexical semantic relations, multilingual data, automatic acquisition of translation equivalents. For example, in Estonia now it's very important, but we lack resources. We don't have parallel corpora for, let's say, Estonian, Russian, Estonian, English, and so on. So this is like future, and definition. So it means that this is the part where we have a lot of work to do in terms of automated lexicography. Now, this was the short overview of what kind of tools do we use and what kind of data do we extract. But we also asked lexicographers how do they feel, what kind of tasks they have to complete on their everyday basis. And here we found out that this job is changing rapidly, and more different kind of things are coming into it. It's not anymore only editing dictionary entries. No, this is clear. But what else do we have to do? We are also involved in this online publication. And it's really like, for us, it's also a new field. We are not specialists in this user interface design, and so that it should be very convenient to use. But we need this knowledge. Yeah? Then user research and user involvement. We have feedback now. So we need methodology also, what to do with all this data, what we have. Like we have our new portal. Now every day we get, let's say, 10 letters from our users. They say, oh, I would like to have this, change this functionality, how to respond on all this, how fast it should be, So user research and user involvement. We analyze logs, we analyze user feedback, we analyze Google Analytics data, we create add-on materials, we deal, for example, I don't know, in many countries, in Estonia also, promotional activities. Even promotional activities now is written in our instruction for lexicography, what is your responsibility, what are your duties at your work. We have to promote our dictionaries, go outside and talk about it. Project management, also important. And crowdsourcing and gamification, those are coming in because we also lack knowledge about it, but we see that it's becoming more and more popular. So we need knowledge about it. And what also changing job of the lexicographers, communication with IT specialists. And actually this research showed that IT tasks are the only tasks that are outsourced. And those tasks, they are very different. They are from designing the online interface, which I said is a very new field for us, and up to offering support or even developing dictionary writing systems and corpus query systems. And actually, when we outsource, there are a lot of problems which are coming with this. Of course, it takes more time, it costs a lot, so we need to look for funds, and also the lack of regular funding. You have, for example, money for 2 years for the development, you outsource it for 2 years, but then suddenly no more money, and then you have to take it over. But then there is a question, are public institutions who are dealing with dictionary compilation, do they have this competence to handle all this IT part of our project? So this is like a very, very serious issue. So I will skip digitations. So needs. Software, such kind of needs like, of course, we all want it to be online, open source, browser independent, intuitive, easy to maintain. Next one, interoperability. Interoperability is a keyword of eLexis, also customization. So it means that our software we use, it should be interoperable with other resources, operating system tools. A lot of lexicographers, in terms of automated lexicography, say they want corpus query system and dictionary writing system to be integrated so that dictionary drafting could be possible and automatic processing of data from corpora, of course. And customizability in terms of functionalities and interface. Also, what is important, API access. Now, for example, my institute, even we do develop dictionary writing system, and at the same time we think about API access. It also costs it, but this is like what the lexicographer says very necessary for all kind of software now. Proper documentation, not black box system, support for collaborative works, online publishing of the results. It should be a functionality of dictionary writing system, and ideally, of course, it should be free. So those are our wishes and needs concerning software. And here, just recent trends. You know, it's lexicographers' needs, as I said, very heterogeneous. In some regions, lexicographers say, oh, we are very happy we have computers now, we don't have to write it on paper. And then you come to Belgium or Holland or Denmark, and then they say, oh, we need sense clustering, and we need sense and semantic annotation and detection of neologisms. So those are our urgent needs. So it's very different. But here, just like also keywords. Automatic acquisition of translation equivalence, lexical semantic relations, diachronic analysis, very important, data visualization. This is what Sketch Engine is now focused on. Tools for harmonization of dictionary formats, common standard for the development of lexicographic resources, a kind of standardization, what is needed. Tools for crowdsourcing, gamification, combining synchronic and diachronic approach in one resource. Retrodigitation, we have like a big part about this. For example, those people who are connected with this, they say they need a kind of common infrastructure for this and better tools also. and central repository. And in terms of training, as I said, that no classical academic training offered by universities anymore. So we probably need to have degree programs, like one is European Master in Lexicography, training materials, more case studies. And what is important, yes, is that all those training materials, they should be now interdisciplinary. It's not enough that we only have theory of how to compile dictionary, those basic phases. We need knowledge about NLP and deep knowledge about NLP. We need knowledge about online publication, interface design, user interaction. So those training materials, they have to change. We did this survey, and our idea was to get ideas and input for eLexis project. And two last slides. How will eLexis help us? First of all, eLexis, we have a lot of working packages, and all different working packages are concentrated on different fields. What needs to be solved. So one working package is about training and education, and we have now 2 years already almost behind, and 2 years ahead. So we will develop the RIA Campus platform for those teaching materials concerning lexicography and e-lexicography. And also we promote grants for research visits. Best practices and standardization. If you go to eLexis homepage, really those deliverables which are there in the corner about deliverables, and there you can find them. For example, in June, there were deliverables, lexical semantic analytics for NLP sense clustering, and early eLexis interoperability report. I'm a lexicographer, my IT level is not that advanced, but I'm capable to read them. So, and they're kind of like educating materials also for let's say, for classical lexicographers. So I just really say you, just if you have an interest, please go to eLexis homepage and read those deliverables. So then you will have like completely new picture of what's going on in e-lexicography. Also, eLexis provides new tools, Sketch Engine, Lexonomy, Dictionary Writing System, eLexifier, NASC. Those are all very fascinating things, no time today. Crowdsourcing and gamification tools, there's also a working package who is working on it. So probably in 2 years we will have those tools, and we can apply our language data with those tools. Automatic knowledge extraction, probably we have some papers here about this one-click dictionary project and perspective, what is possible to do there. And services, Lexifinder and news feed, so that you can actually see what's going on in the world in different kinds of languages in the field of lexicography. So those are basic results of our survey, and really if you want to see like more detailed about publication formats, all with links, it's all provided in this deliverable on eLexis homepage. Yeah, that's it from my part.
Thanks. Any questions? Yes. Is there a mic? No?
Thank you very much for this very useful presentation on the research. Just a quick question. I was wondering if you found any significant differences between the experiences and the needs of commercial lexicographers versus those of academic lexicographers.
Yeah, we didn't focus on it. We just know that the amount of people, like freelancers, there were 22%. They said that they work as freelancers, but we didn't really analyze it separately, but we might because we have the data. Yeah. Yeah, but it's clear that freelancers, they are more working in Northern Europe. Yeah, this is, and English language.
Okay, any other questions or comments? No?
Everything is clear.
Yeah, everything
well,
is...
if you don't have questions, then I can say also about concerns of lexicographers that I think it's very important that as we say, we are here for e-lexicography, but not a lot of lexicographers are not happy with this. They would like still, they prefer would stick to paper, and they say paper is more durable, and also this mobile-first approach. This is also what a lot of lexicographers say they don't like, because if you try to put our printed dictionaries, our unstructured printed dictionaries, but very, very informative in a way, into mobile, let's say, interface, of course we have to get rid of a lot of information. So the quality is a kind of changing, and this is very serious concern of lexicographers. So print dictionaries goes online. And also a lot of say that still the status of lexicography is very low. So this is also what our lexicographic community has to deal with.
Yeah.
Just a practical question. Can we find on the eLexis website information about the previous servers that you said that existed in the previous year?
Yeah, they are kind of publications. They are also on this eLexicography website, right, Simon?
Yeah.
Yeah, because this course section still keeps its website, eLexicography, and not on eLex's website. Only
Yes, so it's another website, elexicography.eu.
Yeah.
And it's on a Lexis server.
eLexicography.
So it was the cost action is maintained now by, so the results of the cost action are maintained now by eLexis.
What is also good about this homepage is that you still can find contacts of all those lexicographers who were participating in this project. So, for example, if you want to have another course, then here you can get all contacts from lexicographers around Europe.
Okay. Any urgent questions? No. So let's thank Jelena.
Thank you.
And we start with the last presentation in 3 minutes. It works. Okay, so we are starting with the last presentation, and I'll keep talking until you go silent. Okay, thanks. So the last one is presented by Caroline Müller-Spitzer and Sascha Wolfer with one author, the first one. Missing and, please, the Sintra variations.
Okay. So why the Sintra variations? So Sintra might be obvious, but variations should point to music, because in music it's a common technique to take a core or the heart of a song, so the melody, and try to rearrange it in a different way, and then we can create something very new. And we try to apply this technique on dictionary interfaces, so we stick to the seldom nice things like Serge Valinde said, so we don't use writing assistants, which probably are the products of the future, but nowadays still online dictionaries are used. So we think it's worth to think how can they look differently as they do now. So we took for these design studies one entry with a particular but characteristic problem, and that is that the entry is too long to show all content on one screen. And we know that from user studies that people don't scroll, so it's a very important question for dictionary designers what to present at first. So normally nowadays online dictionaries use a kind of explorer view, so to take a part of the content and to present it at first, and then to can expand or minimalize parts of the dictionary entry. But we don't use the vertical space. So if you compare it with our conference app, we use the vertical space to go from one day to another, and we use the horizontal space to see what's happened on one day. And if you could transform it to dictionary entries, you could use the vertical space for example, to see different senses of words, and the horizontal space to use for different kinds of information for one sense. So we try to think it out and try to arrange some design studies. These are not evaluated on user studies, what we do normally, because we want just to think it outside the box and try to create something new. And Frank Michaelis is the main person for this work, but unfortunately he can't attend this conference, but we say hello via the live stream to him, and Sascha will present his kind of user studies.
Thank you, Caroline. I have to switch presentation modes here, but I think it's already done. Okay, I have to bend over a little bit while talking. I hope this doesn't distract you too much. So, as you might have already seen, this is a little bit of a different kind of presentation here. We are only using one article as an example, and this is the article of Der Kopf, the head, from the Duden website. It doesn't look like the Duden websites because we stripped it of all the ads and all the boilerplate all around, but the typography and the structure is exactly the same as on the Duden website. And our idea is to use some basic operations, things like disassembling, reassembling of the elements or the building blocks of the article, and use techniques like magnifying, downsizing, flipping, basically all kinds of transpositions to rearrange the article and to do a variation, or, as Caroline did the parallel to music, some kind of improvisations on this article. Let's say the article is the subject and we are improvising on it. So we have one article, we have one problem. The problem is everything has to go in the vertical space right now, and we have many solutions, and we are looking at some of them. So basically, I will run you through this article very quickly. We have the article, the head word, something on orthography. Then the long meaning block begins. We have 5 meanings. While going through there, it's already quite hard to distinguish when does the next meaning start and stuff like that. Then under these meanings, still going on. Here, some synonyms, some etymological information, grammar information, a trivia, did you know, pronunciation information, and some collocations. These are basically the elements and the building blocks we are using now to rearrange the article. So for our first variation, it's not a very big one, but maybe it already helps. It's the same article. I don't want to translate it. Okay. It's not a very big variation. We just added a mini-map right here. That's basically the same article with a small mini-map next to it. It shouldn't be a preview, it just shouldn't be a map which should help the user to orient themselves in the article. So that's no image, it's really the original downsized. All the links are active. If I click on them, it's going to be an accident. I try not to do that. Well, where do mini-maps come from? We think it's computer games. Nowadays, they are also used in text editors. If you're using a rather modern text editor, you also get mini-maps on the side. The purpose of mini-maps is orientation. The user asks, where am I in the greater world of this article? It allows the use of optical landmarks to a certain extent. For example, you see that here there is an image, and down here too. And these images, if you already read through the article once, you know that these images separate meanings, sub-meanings. So these can be used as optical landmarks by going through this article. You can do three things here. You can recognize content that you already read. If I went through this whole orange block here, I recognize it back here. You can use it for fast navigation, just clicking. Right? I want to skip all the meaning, and then I just click down there. And of course, if I'm reading from top to down, I also get the information, where am I? Because some browsers hide this scroll box here, so I don't know it, but the minimap always supplies this little rectangle where you actually are. This gets us an overview of the article, and let's take this minimap. Oh, that's not good that it's there, because there are some buttons. Basically, this is what the minimap looks like, right? Let's disassemble this article into its building blocks. These are the elements we are using, right? Then we have this long meaning block here. We can divide this up even further, maybe use some of the horizontal space here. But you see it's still a kind of stack of information. It's just stacked above each other. So what if we would try to use all this huge white space here on the right? This could look something like this if we already identified these elements or building blocks of the article. We could do it like this. Now nobody can read them, so we take these elements and put them into some kind of grid view. If this would be on your computer screen, you could read the titles. I think for the head word, for example, you can also read it here. So this is what could be called grid view. Each element gets one cell or one tile in this grid. Of course, the elements are cut off and too small to read them in the grid, but we could use the mechanisms of orientation. Let's see where the information is I may be interested in, and then detect it. And somehow it resembles the art of memory, mnemotechnics, you could also call them, that you remember where in space some information lies. This could help you orient yourself in an article. It helps the user to build a mental map of the article. And you could do something like this, just open it, and I detected the information, I'm selecting it, then I'm reading it. No, that's not the meaning I wanted. Taking the next one, meaning number 4. No. Let's skip the meanings and check out the synonyms. This is quite laborious, going through these things, opening it, closing it, and stuff like that. So we arranged little invisible buttons on the edges of the boxes to navigate through this grid while the central window is open. And it could help us to navigate through this grid also from left to right, through the meanings, and so on and so on. So in a way, you could say this is a reversed mini-map because we only see one element of information on the screen at one moment. But back to the principles of orientation and detection. Wouldn't it be nice to let the user select specific tiles and compare them? This is quite easy when you already have this kind of grid overview. This is just one functionality added as soon as I'm selecting one tile. We get this little compare box. It says vergleichen, compare. And we could, for example, compare two meanings. This would help me in learning a foreign language if I want to compare two meanings or associate meanings with synonyms. And I have them next to each other, and so on and so on. This could be a good mechanism. In some way, it's also applied in the paronym dictionary in Ovid. We see this. There it makes sense because you want to compare the meanings of two paronyms. There, Frank used this technique to make comparisons possible. But it's also a little complicated, right? So it's users have a lot of control, but they have to learn how to use this control. So it's good for expert users who exactly know what they want and know where the tiles are to compare them. But maybe it's problematic for occasional users. So let's get back to the drawing board for once. Let's see a schematic overview of what we have seen so far. This is a schematization of the grid view, right? We have the grid of article information and the focus is just shifting over this. Another alternative would be, here is all the information, the focus is static and the user is pulling stuff into the focus and it's then disappearing when the next element comes into focus. Basically, that's not that new because it's just like browsing the web. If you're surfing the web, stuff comes into your focus and it's disappearing again. So what if the focus could expand while going through the article and it's continuously expanding when the next element comes into view? We could use this principle to also work on the article. In this case, the idea is that the user is leaving its own track in the article and it's building up his or her own article just like this. Here are all the categories and let's say we start with the head word and then the user is interested in orthography. Till now it looks like the original one, but now we could say, okay, and now I'm interested in the trivia and in pronunciation and so on and so on. There is one problem because here it says Bedeutungen, meanings, and if I click on this, it basically further divides the meanings, and I want to add meaning to be. Of course, the user doesn't know what's behind meaning to be. He just has to go through all the meanings till they find something they're interested in, and that's not too effective here. So for our final variation, we only need a few visual tweaks. Maybe you already thought, well, this basically looks like a messenger app, right? It's some kind of dialogue the user is doing with the dictionary system or something like this. He says, for example, I'm interested in synonyms, and then the synonyms pop up. And he's interested in pronunciation, and the system gives the answer of the pronunciation. So with a few visual tweaks, we really get this is the final variation here, we get what could be called Dudenbot. And we give the user the opportunity to say, hello Duden. And Duden says, hello human. You could ask Duden, how's the weather gonna be tomorrow? Let's do that. And Duden will tell you, I've got no idea. I'm a dictionary and no weather station. Okay, then I'll ask something about dictionaries. Do you know the word head? Well, of course, what do you want to know? Is overhead without space or over space head correct? And Duden will tell you, well, that depends. If you're drying your hair overhead, then you should use it with a space, or if the pain is distributing from your neck over your head through your neck to the shoulders, then over the head is with space. But if you're working overhead or you're hitting a ball overhead, then you could use it without a space. You could be satisfied with the answer, say, thank you very much, Dudenbot. Or you could say, okay, and why is that so? Remember, this information is in the article. Why this is the case, it's not in the article, and the bot has to deal with this. If I'm asking them, okay, why is that so? And Dudenbot says, well, then I guess you have to ask Grammis at the IDS, because maybe the information is there. So the Dudenbot could also point you to other resources where you find information they don't have. Let's ask a question about synonyms. What can I say instead of head? Well, how about, and then some synonyms on head. And if you're satisfied, maybe this basically takes the first meaning, looks for synonyms for the first meaning, and presents them to the user. But maybe the user is interested in synonyms for another meaning of head, to be or three, we saw before. No, that's not the correct one. And Dudenbot says, then you have to specify more like someone's the head of something, the boss, or I'm thinking of a person with specific intellectual skills. Let's take the second one. Dudenbot thinks and says, maybe leader, and then all the synonyms for leading person, this meaning of head. And if that's still not it, you're getting back to the previous dialogue option. I'm thinking of a person with specific intellectual skills. And this is another thing bots could do. They could ask questions back. So, you're looking for a formulation like, she is a smart head. In this case, I only have one option. Yes, that's what I mean. And Duden says, then maybe appearance, figure, being, and so on. And basically, now all the synonyms are through, and you just have the option to say, well, that's perfect. And Dudenbot is very happy to help. So basically, that's the run through this little bot variation. And if you found this something somehow funny, strange, or absurd, then we somehow reached our goal, because this might be the point of some of these transpositions we presented. You could even say this is some kind of parody of how dictionaries are integrated into bot-like, chatbot-like systems. But the interesting thing is that we thought about two things when creating these variations. The first one concerns the context of dictionary use, because after all, dictionaries are tools that should help people solve specific language problems in specific situations. And we had to think about, well, which questions or problems could the users arrive at Duden, and the bot should be able to deal with these questions the people ask. And maybe the chatbot seems strange because we are used to integrated orthography checkers in our smartphones or author dictionaries, and not in this chatbot-like format. The other thing is writing, because in the end we're just not used to write text in such a way. There's like a little theater script behind this chatbot. It looks like a theater script where the dialogue options are scripted. We are more used to long, coherent text, and but for us it was a really good training because we had to anticipate what the users might do, think, or want, and which questions might they ask, how might the question be formulated, what do they expect of an answer. That's really important. And the good thing is you have to be explicit about your assumptions. If you want to put them into a formal system like a chatbot, you really have to be specific and cannot leave anything underspecified because the system has to deal with it. It's quite hard to think about these things, but we think such practices could be really useful for the normal, everyday work on a dictionary article. So, to sum up, we showed some concept studies, and of course, if there are concept studies involved, you don't get around cars. And just like prototypes of cars, of course, the things we showed are not meant for production in this form, but they help us to formulate some questions we have to think about when writing the articles, and they are there to inspire us to think outside of the box of everyday work. Also, when you're working with a team, it could be really great to have these studies so that other members of your team could really play around with it, get the look and feel of these systems. And for this, they really have to be implemented. So just like prototypical articles, you write prototypical articles, so prototypical interfaces for your dictionary might be really interesting. And in the end, lexicography is a really practical discipline and not a theoretical one. You can see this because it ends in graphy, and writing is a very practical thing. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes?
Hi, thanks very much. It's interesting to see what happens when you do think outside the box, so thank you. Bringing it down to practical application, it seems as though your ideas for deconstructing an entry are very desktop-based, whereas we know that our site, for instance, is more than 60% mobile. So how would you address that challenge with this kind of approach to deconstructing an entry?
Maybe I think the last one, the chatbot variation, was the most obvious one where the frame we showed around the chatbot application is already reminiscent of a smartphone, right? So, but for the other things, I agree, but I'm interested in what Caroline has to say.
So I think the basic thing is to go in both directions. It's very good for mobile devices. So just not only to use this space, but only to use this one. You see it in our conference app. And now we use the entry with a lot of information in that. The Kopf entry is a very polysemic article with a lot of pictures and sense information. And so most entries are not that long. And then you can arrange like this part of building blocks also on a smartphone. But we know that the current practice is, like most of, more than half of lookups are from mobile devices. But I think, to use more both directions is very good for mobiles. Yeah.
Okay. Andra?
Thank you for this interesting presentation, and I like the idea very much to use visualization that is very well known to every one of us. So, but I was wondering, as you showed us a very polysemous word, but also if you have a word with 3 meanings or whatever, the problem, so how could you or could this approach overcome the problem that is called the kidwell strategy? So choosing the first opportunity or the first meaning or whatever you have. So the awareness of what you are looking for must be very high, the language awareness, so that you don't choose simply the first question or that you ask this kind of question at all. So have you done any previous studies or something like this, or have you any ideas concerning this?
Well, it's nothing for on-the-fly users, and most users are on-the-fly users. We know that. So people want to have information very quickly. But we also have these kind of more specialized dictionaries. So at the IDS we have them. And we have also these more customized tools for learning courses or something like that. And I think, honestly, only for these resources, it is a really good idea to think about different kinds of presentation, like we did it with the Dictionary of Paronyms. It's a very special opportunity, special use case to look up paronyms, and then you take the time to compare different senses, because no on-the-fly users knows what paronyms are, so they don't look up a dictionary for paronyms.
Maybe one addition. If it really boils down to the question, do people know better that there is more than one sense for Kopf? Then, for example, the grid view, as soon as people are acquainted with the view, suggests this a lot more than the vertical stack view, where you really have to actively scroll to get to the second sense to even see that there is a second sense. For the grid view, you already see that there are several meanings for Kopf. But as Caroline said, it's the question whether drive-by users would really use this information.
Istok?
Yeah, I would just continue with this. I mean, for me, the more relevant question is probably a few steps back, because if you think nowadays the users, they type in Google, they take the first few hits, so I would imagine you have to choose the source as well. So type in many sources, find something in those sources. I mean, it's normally, by the time you get to this stage, I wouldn't find many users being ready to overcome that much information. So I think the bot discussion that you showed is probably for a lexicographer linguist typical, asking loads of questions because people would normally give up earlier than that. So I would like to see this sort of approach shifted to the multiple resource search type problem.
Yeah, so design studies are not the solution for the crisis of lexicography. That's right, yeah. But I think there is academic lexicography, we still do that, and maybe we could improve these dictionaries we have, but it's not the step into the future to keep all users in our resources. You're right.
Oh, there's another one. I just wanted to end, but okay, let's have the last one. The last one.
Is it on? Yeah, okay.
Yeah?
Thanks. It was really cool to see. This is just going to be a really short question. I was wondering, since most online dictionaries just offer a horizontal, vertical view of an entry that the user would scroll through to find the information they desire, so how would you actually determine what kind of information is the most sought out for the bot, for example, because most online dictionaries are not based on queries where the user would actually search for a specific component. So how do you determine that?
So is your question how the bot chooses information?
Yeah, because you said that the bot it has to predict what the user would like to know about the entry. So how do you find out what kind of information is the most sought out of?
Yeah. Well, in this case, it's really a scripted play. The user gets a few choices for question, has to choose one, and then there's, just like in the play, there are forking paths in the script. What happens if the user says yes? What happens if the user says no? And stuff like that. In real-time application, this would have to work wholly different. Or you script all your dictionary articles with these specific scripts.
Yeah, it's the way is as long as for writing assistants from the main idea to go in the actual text production situation. So yeah, it would be a long way to go to operate the chatbot.
No.
Really good to extract this information from the entry to the normal language questions of the users.
I might have not.
Okay, we have to stop and you can discuss during the lunch. We are hungry. Thank you very much.